Good evening, fellow vapors. This is Cass, and today I'm back at you with another juice review. Yes, today we're going to be looking at the long-anticipated Jeffries Vintage Bakes range. It should be up on your screen now. This is a range of 5 flavors. It came into existence probably end of last year, November, December time, and it was finally released in the middle of January. And today I'm lucky enough to have the range here to review for you guys. So let's get straight down to it. The first flavor we're going to be looking at is the bread and butter pudding from Jeffries Vintage Bakes. What do they say about it? Jeffries Vintage Bakes bread and butter pudding, a traditionally British dessert, lovingly developed, sprinkled with spiced currants and soaked in a British double cream custard and baked to perfection. Not too soggy, not too crispy, a truly indulgent vape. I love bread and butter pudding. I love how it tastes. I love that sort of burnt crisp on top. So let's get on with it. My setup today is, as you are probably well aware, the Vulcan 1 mech with the Alpha RDA on top. This is a lovely setup for tasting juices on, which is why I use it so much. So this is the Jeffries Vintage Bakes bread and butter pudding. Right off the bat with this one, you can taste the butteriness in this. It is quite a subtle flavour in comparison to a lot of baked flavours, which really go fully over the top with the amount of flavouring they put in this, but this one is quite a subtle one. So you get that butteriness on the inhale, you get this sort of bready creaminess on the inhale, and then on the exhale you get that burnt crisp top, you get that sort of creamy mixture of the bread with that sort of doughy flavour, and that works really well on this one. It's subtle enough that you could all day this vape. It's not overly sweet, it's not overly sickly, and it's a nice light flavour, and I used a little bit of it for a day or two not that long ago, and it's not a coil killer. It's actually really clean, and you'd expect for a juice like this. And I mean, there are other juices in this range like the sticky toffee pudding, which we'll look at in a moment, which you'd expect to be an absolute coil killer, and they're simply not. For whatever reason, they just don't seem to kill your coils, which is, you know, a nice addition, because sometimes you get dessert vapes that you absolutely love, but you have to re-wick or change your coils so often that it makes it just a pain in the butt. It's a lovely mixture. It's not something that you see often, and to go for that bready sort of crispy top with the creamy dessert, and to mix those all together in such a finite amount, you've got a lot of flavors that are quite similar there, so to be able to find distinction in them is quite a tricky thing to do. A lot of the time it would end up just being a mess of this sort of creaminess. Isn't what we're going for here. I think this one is aimed specifically to, so you do get that distinction between the sort of the creamy custardy flavor and the bread and that burnt crisp. It just works, and it's really nice and buttery, and I think if you're looking for a subtle dessert all day, this would be one definitely to check out. Now, I will be putting a link to the website that you can buy all these from in the description, so if there's any that takes your fancy, please check them out. Right, the next one, let's move on to the next one. So the next one we're looking at is Shortbread by Jeffries Vintage Bakes. So Shortbread is the British favourite, is a classic which is light and buttery, freshly baked with a traditional shortbread flavour. This comforting, crumbly, buttery and vanilla shortbread will leave you hungry for more. It's brave to do just a shortbread. Normally you'd expect it to be like strawberry shortbread or lemon shortbread, but for it to be just a shortbread, it means that the shortbread flavour has to really stand out on its own. Let's have a go. This is the Jeffries Vintage Bakes Shortbread. Surprisingly, this is another subtle vape. Shortbread, again, is quite a subtle flavour when you're actually eating the thing. So for this to come across quite subtle isn't actually that surprising. You've got a nice vanilla hit in there. You've got that sort of biscuity taste. It's almost like a dry biscuity taste, because shortbread is, at the end of the day, quite dry. And you've got that butteriness as well. And I think the 3 flavours together, that sort of biscuit, that vanilla, and that butteriness, work well together in this. And this, surprisingly, is another subtle all-day vape. It's rare to come across desserts that are such good all-dayers, but this one works well for that, and for that I am pleasantly surprised. Again, you'd expect it to be quite a heavy flavour. Now, because of that subtlety, I think you're going to have to be running quite a hot build to bring that flavour out of there. Otherwise, you do run the risk of losing that flavour over the period of, say, a day or 2 days. But if you're running a hot enough build, or you've got a tank with a nice powerful coil in it, that flavour's really going to come through. I mean, I'm using 0.1 aliens in mine, so it's quite a hot build, which is how I'm getting that flavour. If you're using anything that's a little bit more subtle, I think you're going to start to lose some of that flavour in that vape. But that said, it's a beautiful blend of what could, if it were done wrong, just end up be a mass of almost nothing, and actually you do get some distinction in the flavour with this. It's quite pleasant in that respect, and I do quite like it. I'd probably add something to it. Maybe I'd just throw a jam in there one day, or throw a blueberry in there one day, just to mix it up a little bit. But that doesn't take away from the juice itself. It doesn't say that it needs those things. It's just, you know, people like to mix their juices together, so this would be a really good base. If you liked mixing these juices together, that would work really well with this. But if you ask after a good straightforward biscuit, check it out, because I think this shortbread works well, and you've got that hint of vanilla, you've got that sort of dry biscuity taste, and then you've got the butteriness underneath all of it, which is a beautiful mix to go for. It's again, both of these are curious desserts to choose, because they don't seem like the obvious ones, but maybe that's why they work, because they're not the obvious desserts to go for. It's not just another lemon tart. Right, let's move on to the third flavour in this range. Now, the third flavour in this range I've been looking forward to for a long time, since I heard that this flavour was going to be in the range, and this flavour is Battenberg. Now, I love me a Battenberg cake. This traditional British cake is light and fluffy buttery almond sponge cake, brought together with an apricot jam smothered in marzipan, delicately formed from honey and almonds. This pink and yellow favourite will leave you reminiscing about days past. I love Battenberg, so let's see if this one hits the mark. Now, the tricky thing with a Battenberg is that it's got almond in, and if the almond is done wrong, it can end up tasting a little bit like a methylated spiritsy, like cherry almond thing. And let's see if they have done it well. So this is Battenberg by Jeffries Vintage Bakes. That is spot on a Battenberg. It's absolutely nailed it for me. The first and foremost flavour you get in this is that almond marzipan. That's what you get on the inhale, that's what you get on the exhale. There's a hint of that sponge cake in there, and there's even less of a hint of that marzipan, apricot jam in there. If I were to change anything about it though, it would be maybe a little bit more sponge and a little bit more jam, but that is the Battenberg flavour that I know and love. It's spot on. It's quite sweet. It's the sweetest of the range so far, so I think you might have trouble all daying that. That said, I do know people that have done an entire bottle of this in like 2 days, maybe even less. So if you like almonds, you like marzipan, and you like that spongy hit, this is definitely one to look at, because I don't remember another Battenberg flavour, and to get a mix that's so nice with this actually works really well. Like I said, if I were to change anything, I'd have possibly a little bit more of that sponge and maybe a touch less almond. To say that would mean that it wouldn't necessarily taste like a Battenberg. Battenbergs are heavy on the marzipan, they're heavy on that almond, and they work well for that. The jam if you ever see a Battenberg, the jam is just the bit that attaches the marzipan to the sponge cake. So it's gonna, in the grand scheme of things, you're not necessarily going to taste it as much as you would, say, the marzipan itself. But it's nail on the head. I mean, I remember when I received this in the post, I had a smell of it. I had a with back of the hand dab test, and I was like, well, that's marzipan. And I'm glad that it comes across vaping like marzipan. I think this one would do well with not so hot a build. I think if you have a really, really hot build, I think it tends to take away the fruity flavors from this. So I think if you were to put it in, say, a tank that was slightly lower powered, I think you are going to get more true flavor than you would on, say, a high powered mech mod. I think it's going to balance those flavors out. I think more of that fruit's going to come through. I think a touch more of that sponge is going to come through, and I think it might dull out the almond just a touch and give it a bit of balance. To get for accuracy, this is 10 out of 10. It tastes exactly like a Battenberg. Okay, let's move on to the penultimate flavor in this range. The penultimate flavor in this range is sticky toffee pudding. So, sticky toffee pudding, a British classic enjoyed across the decades. Soft dates, treacle, and a luxurious toffee sauce finished off with a dark dark muscovado sugar, gently steamed for a warming and comforting vape. Actually very interested by this one. I'm not the huge lover of caramel vapes. I find them to be overly sickly, I find them to be overly sweet, and I find the flavour to be sometimes too dense. So let's see if this one can live up to the standards. Now don't get me wrong, I love a sticky toffee pudding to eat. Let's see how it vapes. The two main elements of a sticky toffee pudding are creamy, spongy, cakey bit of it, and you've got the caramel toffee drizzle over the top. And somehow they've managed to provide quite clear separation in those two flavours that, when mixed together, get you that sticky toffee pudding. So on the inhale, you get that sort of spongy, puddingy, cakey goodness that you would expect. It's got a hint of that date in there. It's got that sort of sweet sugar to it. Now this one is probably the sweetest of the range so far, but that's because obviously it's a toffee flavour. It's also the heaviest of the range so far, but it's not too heavy, it's not too dense. It is a very smooth vape. Now, out of all of the Jeffries ranges that I've done, I mean, I've done their vintage vapes, I'm going to be doing their cocktail dreams so far, and obviously this is the Bakes range. They are all insanely smooth, which is why I think they are a little bit, you know, they keep their head above water with that, because it's just such a smooth vape. None of them are too heavy in that respect. This is one that, because you've got that toffee and you've got this sort of, there's this sort of flavour that you don't quite recognise. Now, I've spoken to Mark, the guy that make these, and it's actually a fig flavour that's in there. I didn't know you put figs in a sticky toffee pudding, but he says you do, and that in there gives it this sort of unique twist of flavour that really makes it quite interesting. And on that end of that exhale, all you get is this smooth toffee flavour that is absolutely divine. I personally couldn't all day this, simply because it's just a touch heavy for me as an all day vape. I like my lighter, fruitier, fresher flavours to all day, but this is that one flavour that we have in every range, which is the one that you'd sit down, vape it in the evening, and then have something slightly lighter during the day. I think it works because of that. And to have that contrast, you've got the nice light bread and butter pudding and shortbread. I imagine the trifle is going to be quite light, but we'll have a look at that in a second. And then to have something like Battenberg and sticky toffee pudding to be your evening vapes, the slightly heavier ones that you're not going to all day, but you're going to sit down and actually enjoy. I think that providing that contrast makes for a decent range. Let's have a look at the last flavour. Now, the last flavour I've been saving to last for a reason, because I think it's going to be my favourite. We'll see. Right, so Jeffries Bakes Trifle, a classic favourite combining fresh plump strawberries and crisp ladyfinger biscuits with a thick layer of traditional custard, finished off with lashings of lightly whipped fresh cream, a flavour that will certainly invoke childhood memories. So this is the Trifle from Jeffries Vintage Bakes. This already, before I get into the description, this one is the favourite in the range for me. So to start with, on the inhale you get this super creamy sweet strawberry flavour, and on the exhale you get that perfect flavour of like that strawberry jelly jam stuff that you get in a trifle. It's not quite jelly, it's not quite jam, and you've got this creamy underlayer that runs all the way through it. I don't get that much biscuitiness, but I'm sure if you wanted to boost that biscuitiness, you could just add some shortbread, and that's going to really boost that flavour. When it comes to a trifle, it's all about the strawberries, it's all about the cream, and those two are in a perfect balance with each other. Now, if you don't like creamy vapes and you don't like sweet vapes, maybe this one isn't for you, but the strawberry is accurate and it's not over the top. It's not like a Just Jam flavour where they've put strawberry in and then they've added 1000% more strawberry and absolutely killed it. I think with this, it's subtle enough that it's not going to be too sweet, but it's there enough that you know it's there. And I think that's the key balance that a lot of places miss out, a lot of companies miss out, is that they've got this balance. And because it's not just strawberry flavour, it's like strawberry jelly, and that's lovely. That's absolutely lovely. If I had to change anything, I'd probably add a bit more sponge, maybe throw an element of, say, a port in there, or a sherry, something with a little bit of a bite to it, an alcoholic bite. For something that is going to be a sweet dessert, something that is going to be something that you absolutely enjoy, that you had as a child, this is definitely going to bring that back. It's just a perfect blend of flavors. You've got the cream, you've got the strawberry, you've got that sort of hint of biscuitiness, and you've got the jelly and the custard flavors, and that's all I ate as a child. So for me, this is spot on. I haven't got a bad word to say about this particular flavor. I think in order of favoritistness, I think Trifle takes the #1 spot. I think my next favorite is possibly the Battenberg. The bread and butter pudding and the sticky toffee pudding are sort of joint fourth or joint third, and then in fourth/fifth you've got the shortbread. And I think the shortbread's last, not because it's a bad flavour, but simply because it's the simplest. I do like my complex flavours, and this is one I'd go to as an all-day sort of base flavour, but the Trifle wins it because I love strawberry jelly, and this one's not over the top, it's not synthetic, the cream is nice, and the biscuit is wonderful. And I think that wraps up the Jeffries Vintage Bakes range. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mark for sending these juices my way for the purposes of this review. Obviously, it hasn't affected my review in this case. They genuinely are a solid range of flavors. If you want to buy these, I think they are £13 for a 50ml short fill, which is a decent price. Definitely worth checking at least 1 or 2 of these out. If you go for the whole range, even better. I'll pop the link in the description below, and you can have a look for yourselves, and in that link you'll find all of the other Jeffries flavors as well. So that about wraps it up for Jeffries Vintage Bakes. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, please hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to smash the notification bell. That's going to let you know when I upload. Otherwise, it probably won't let you know when I upload, and you're going to miss loads of awesome reviews. I've got loads of cool stuff coming up soon. I've got some hardware coming through. I've got some new ranges from companies that I've previously reviewed. So thank you again for watching. My name is THISisCAS, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.